Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. It is Monday, December 20th, 2021, and I am here to share more true ghost stories from the web. As always, to find episodes and social media links and ways to donate to the podcast, you can visit my podcast page, which is salsidoparanormal.podbean.com, and that's SALSIDO, it's D as in dog. If you have any comments or questions or topic suggestions or experiences, whether they're your own or from others, that you'd like to share for me to read on the show, you can send all of that to my email address, which is salsidoparanormal@gmail.com, or you can send them to me through Discord as well, where I'm Salsido Media, which is also the name of the server where I do these streams. So either way works. So yeah, that's basically it. This is going to be a short week due to the holidays and everything, here in the US at least anyway. I'll be streaming today, and then tomorrow night and Wednesday night, and that'll be it until the beginning of the new year. We'll see how that goes. I'm considering moving the schedule up a bit so that I stream Sundays through Thursdays. If y'all want to let me know what you think of that, just for various reasons, I think I'd like to try that. If that doesn't work for most of you, please let me know, and then I'll just stay with what I'm on right now. Just thinking of new things to try to get the podcast out there more to more people. But I think that's it for now as far as all the housekeeping goes. And so with that, I will get on to the stories. There's a mix of long ones and short ones in here, so I don't know how many we'll get through today. So this first one says, I don't know if this is a super exciting experience, but I've been having some trouble with something in my apartment. I've been hearing a lot of shuffling and movement around. Keep in mind, my place is a one-bedroom apartment. When I'm home, alone, and the sound of things being dropped and footsteps, specifically, in the room I'm currently in. I've heard a disembodied voice whisper, as though it had been a person sitting right next to me, that my music or TV was too loud, and have also had said TV turned on and off by itself at random times. I did some brief research with a neighbor and found out that supposedly the building used to be an old library, so it might have something to do with that. My neighbor also mentioned that their brand new speaker kept turning its volume down by itself. So that's interesting. If it used to be a library, then I could kind of see why, if there's some kind of a spirit there, they'd want things quiet, if they're still thinking it's a library. Or if there's some kind of weird overlap in time periods, maybe the noise from the apartment is coming through somehow, the apartments. But yeah, as Open says, I kind of love the idea of a haunted library, but I'm a book nerd. Yeah, I'm the same way. You know what's funny, though? It depends on what kind of haunting it is, or what kind of activity it is, because I think I mentioned this before, but there's a library that that's not too far from me. I won't say exactly where, but it's an older library, and the kids section used to always be in the basement, and I never liked that basement. Specifically, one area, basically it was the area that was, I don't know if it was off limits, but only the staff really went in there, because it was like the elevator for bringing stuff up and down, and it was this hallway room kind of thing outside of the room with all the books. And even as a kid, I didn't like that area. I always stayed away from it, and I didn't even like really being in the basement, but there are books there, so I dealt with it. And that feeling over the years never changed. And I found out later that my mom also never really liked that basement for that same kind of reason. And I don't know all the details, but apparently years and years ago, there was a fire down there. I don't know if anyone was hurt or killed. I didn't really get to look into the details of that. Yeah, that basement was always strange. I didn't like it so much. Of course, now maybe now I'd be able to handle it better, now that I'm kind of looking into all this, and I react more to the feelings I get off of places. Like, I don't know if I focus, but I'm more open to seeing if it's really that negative, or if I'm just picking up on energy, and it's just fear can can make you kind of think that things are negative, even if they may not always be that way. Not that negative stuff isn't out there. Just saying, if you're not used to this stuff and you go to a place and you feel something, that's I can see how that would be scary, and people might assume it's bad. So I don't know. But yeah, Eyes Open says basements are creepy in general outside of paranormal activity. Yeah, they can be. They're underground, and I don't think humans like being underground to begin with. I don't know. I don't know. It's but yeah, that story just, and then the comments here in chat made me think of that one library. But it does sound like the things that are happening, it's not like there's the volume on devices is being turned up. It's being turned down. Now, I do wonder about the devices being turned on. I'm wondering if maybe whoever or whatever is there is trying to, maybe, I don't know, if they get bored sometimes, like once in a while, and so they decide to turn something on, or if they're just trying to make sure it doesn't make noise and they just accidentally turn it on. I don't know. But I thought that was a neat little story there. Probably not fun to deal with, but at least if it is a spirit, it's a librarian that's just trying to keep things quiet and peaceful. Anyway, it's just interesting. But yeah, so thought that was a good story. I think I'll move on to the next one here. Okay, this one says, this one is a long one. That's a good one. It's interesting. I'm from North Mexico, and I have plenty of ghost stories, and an unusual connection between me and my family with them. So I'll start with a little context about my family. My grandparents come from an ex-hacienda, which it was just like a village essentially. And we can date my earliest ancestors having lived through Mexico's revolution, as they used to tell stories about people being killed and buried in the surroundings of the hacienda. Fast forward to the 1950s, my grandparents, uncle, and aunts, who have moved at the time to the nearest city, visited regularly in the summer, and there's where the ghost stories begin. One of my aunts, her name was Anna, was particularly connected to them. At an early age, she could sense them, talk to them, and see them. She often woke up at night and said that, I lost my place, and would walk through the hacienda talking with other girls, as she described them, pale as the moon, and with soft, somehow melancholic voices. She often said, "Here's Maria, there's Luisa, and over there's Anna." And apparently this was another spirit with the same name. Those specific locations she mentioned were the exact places where mass graves were dug 40 years prior to these stories. Then there's my uncle, who remained skeptical about ghosts all his life, even being witness to some strange things around the hacienda. He still wasn't sure about what to believe in. He woke up at 4 a.m. as he heard some strange noises in the hall. As it was normal back then that the farm animals could sneak up to the big house, so he ran downstairs with a stick, ready to scare off some animal, but instead found nothing, and the sounds kept running around the house. Confused, he tracked down the noises to the corridor that connected the big house with the church. As he opened the door that led to the corridor, the noises became clear as a choir. He tried to open the door, but failed, as it was locked from the other side. He peeked through the keyhole and noticed 6 kids facing forwards and still singing, though he didn't recognize any of them. Suddenly, something hit the door so hard he fell backwards. Scared, he ran upstairs and hid between his bed sheets. He told me that told me that story back in 2013. He was confused still, as he couldn't figure out what could have hit the door so hard that it sent him backwards with such force, as the door was so big and wide that a kid could only half open it, grabbing it with both hands and pushing with a foot on the wall, let alone push it or hit it so hard it could move around its door frame. As for me, I often experience a certain feeling when I talk about someone who passed away. Sometimes I cry when I tell ghost stories, and sometimes I feel fear, even when I merely had any interaction with the person I'm talking about. So there you go. That sounds like a active location. So yeah, just getting back to the library story here. There's a couple of comments I want to read. Hello, Vicky. Thank you for joining. Vicky says they are probably trying to communicate. Yeah, and then Lily says maybe when things turn on, it's them creating a surge in electricity when they enter. Yeah, it could be a lot of things. So, getting back to this last story I read, yeah, that's quite the story. I mean, all those kids. It sounds like it was all kids with the aunt and then the uncle. It sounds like it was all kids, which is sad, but it's also just it's strange. Eyes Open says, why is it creepier with kid ghosts? I mean, that is. I hadn't realized it when I was reading the story, like when I read the story the first time, but both sightings, both times it was kids. So I don't know. That's a good point. That just seems. I'm always interested in those places where generations seem to have activity there, whether it's the people or the place. I don't know. It sounds like in that case it could be a mixture of both, maybe. But yeah, that was an interesting one. I think also partly for me just because my family, my grandparents, even though they're now both passed on, they came from Mexico and Texas area, and that's one thing you do here. I mean, there's a lot of I could do whole episodes just on that area. So yeah, interesting stuff. So let's see here. I'll get on with the next story. This one says, back in 1982, I was at a friend's house visiting when his niece, who lived next door, came running in, yelling that her dad had fallen on the floor. He and I went over to check on him. Getting to him first, I felt for a pulse. I felt one very faint heartbeat, and then nothing. The EMTs came and worked on him before taking him to the hospital. So my friend, his niece, and I went back to his house. About half an hour later, his niece wanted to go get some clothes out of the house. I followed her over there to get her clothes. She didn't want to sleep in her house that night. We entered the house and the living room where her dad had died. It was on the right and her bedroom was towards the left. While following behind her, I felt a hand grab my right shoulder. I looked back to the spot where he had died and thought, I'll do my best to take care of her. And that's where that one ends. That's quite the experience to have. It's sad that the person passed, but the writer obviously picked up on something there. It's quite the thing to have happen, but it was, I don't know. That's really fast in between the, that sounds like the train of thought there is pretty obvious. It was the spirit of the dad. Could be, yeah. Eyes Open says the dad probably didn't know he had died yet when he grabbed. Yeah, I don't know if the writer was a he or she. Apparently, that was who the was grabbed by the shoulder. Luckily, it wasn't the daughter that could have been bad. But yeah, really, at least hopefully, if everyone was lucky, maybe the dad heard the thought and hopefully got the message. I guess that's all we could really hope in that situation. I mean, that's not uncommon for there to be activity right after. You hear about that, and if you listen to enough shows or read enough, you'll find stories about people that work in hospitals, and they're sometimes like right after someone passes, something strange will happen in that room where they passed. So yeah, there's something to that. I don't know. Obviously, I don't know how it all works, but there's something to that. That's for sure. We'll move on to the next one here. This one says, in 1992, when I was 13, we moved into a house that used to be a blacksmith shop owned by a wealthy man that lived in the mansion close by. It was cheap rent for my mom, who was raising my 10-year-old brother and I by herself. So despite the rumors of being haunted by tormented and tortured slaves that died under horrible conditions there, she decided it was worth it. About a month after moving in is when strange things started happening. Lights flickering on and off. Doors would be open that weren't open a few minutes ago. Creaks in the floors above us when no one was upstairs. But nothing super scary. Yet scary enough to not want to be home alone ever. Fast forward about 6 months later. My mom met a guy who had a 14-year-old daughter named T that moved into the house with us. Since my bedroom was the biggest, I shared my room with her, and we became very close, like sisters, quickly. To get to our room, we had to walk through my brother's room first, which was at the top of the stairs. One night, soon after all the lights were out, while T and I were laying in our beds talking quietly, I heard our bedroom door squeak a bit and saw the shadow of it move on the wall by the foot of my bed. As T stopped mid-sentence, I realized she heard it too, and was looking at the door also. Then I saw a dark mass in the doorway, low to the ground. Without hesitation, I yelled at my brother, "Get off the floor and get back in bed." It wasn't until my brother said, "I am in bed," in a half-asleep voice, that I felt a wave of terror numb my body. as I watched this figure crawl between T's bed and mine, then out of my sight range. I looked toward T and whispered, "T, did you see it? Where did it go?" Scared witless, she whispered back, "It's under your bed." And I jumped up, backed up against my wall, and leaped from my bed onto T's and got under her blanket with her. We both stayed there until morning. This was one of many strange encounters in this house I've had. And, yeah, it does not sound fun. That's an odd thing for anyone to do, unless they're trying to scare someone. I mean, that's I don't know. Why would there... I mean, unless it's some crazy kind of residual where there was something there, and that action meant something to another time, where someone had to crawl across the surface, like a floor or something. It's still... I mean, I would hope that's all it is, because otherwise that's scary. That's not, does not sound good. So that's all I can hope there with that. But, yeah, Eyes Open says sounds like an entity with ulterior motives. Yeah, it's either that or, like I said, something happened and there's just some kind of residual energy where someone did basically crawl across that space every so often and just, or once, and it was just such a traumatic event for whoever was there that they left that energy there. But that's quite the thing to see. Eyes Open says, glad they were able to get themselves out of the way. Yeah. I don't know. I'm debating if I can get the research done in time. I want to do it. It'll either be this Wednesday or it'll be one of the first episodes after my little break over the holidays. But I still need to do an episode on shadow figures as far as what they are and a couple of stories. Although it'll mainly just be an episode about what they could be, because I mean, I find stories about these things all the time, so I don't think we need to have an episode just with stories like that when we've already got them sprinkled throughout all the episodes. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's definitely a shadow figure episode is definitely definitely planned for as soon as I can get it all worked out. Excuse me, I'm gonna get some water and then I can go on to the next story here. This next one is a long one too, but that's because it's a few experiences. And the person brings up an interesting question. Basically, the title of the story, and I didn't copy and paste that, but it's basically something like asking, am I haunted? You know, that kind of thing. And then the story goes like this. It says, I've had odd experiences in every home I've lived in. I'll give you the most interesting encounters first. One night, I saw my husband walking into our bedroom. He moved oddly, not his usual walk. I went in to talk to him, and no one was there. I found him playing video games across the house, wearing a totally different shirt. It says, one night, very late, I was driving home on a dark road from a friend's house, and saw something move a little in the road. I flashed my high beams, and there was a woman standing in the middle of my lane, wearing a bathrobe, and her head was slumped over, so her hair was in her face. I panicked and honked the horn. She didn't react at all. I swerved and kept driving, and called the police. My initial thought was she could have Alzheimer's, and wandered out. The police checked, and couldn't find her at all, but the way she moved so slowly, when I saw her, made me think she isn't fast enough to walk or run away from the scene. Plus, that stretch of road is only 1 mile and has 2 exits. I was sitting at one of them. I kept an eye on the news afterward to see if there was a missing person. I still wonder if this was a real ghost or a lost elderly woman. So when I was a kid, I lived in an 80-year-old home that was really cool and also haunted. It had secret passages built into the walls. My bedroom was the attic, redone, and I found out when I was older that the previous owner had died in the home. In that home, I would hear my name being called from above me very often. I was young, and it happened so often that I really believed houses could talk. My family would also hear footsteps going down the stairs, and when I got older, my brother told me he heard his name a lot in that house too, from the same female voice. In my next home, built in the 1980s, I'd see shadow people and hear footsteps constantly, and occasionally hear kids giggling in the middle of the night. I had thought maybe the giggling came from outside, like neighborhood kids. So I checked each time, and no one was around. I was still a kid myself, and remembered being jealous that other kids got to play around at midnight. So they're basically jumping from experience to experience here. This next one says, I lived in an apartment for a year that was built on Native American soil. The residents would share stories of seeing Native American ghosts in their units. I didn't see a full apparition, but something would bang on my bed at night, and my dog would growl at thin air. I saw shadow people there too. Now onto my home as an adult. I'd hear someone running through my house and then stop in front of me. My dog heard or saw it too, and sat up and stared at the spot where it stopped. It's weird because the floor changes from wood to carpet, and the sound of the footsteps changed as well once its feet hit carpet. Another time, I came home from work and heard someone in my bedroom say hello. I was home alone. Also, I see a shadow person in our bathroom here, usually walking into the closet. Anyway, that's all. Wanted to share my stories. And that's a lot of stories. A lot of places. So, yeah, it's, Eyes Open says, sounds like she's a medium without knowing she has the gift. Yeah, it's, whoever this writer is, it's really wild. That's a lot of things happening in a lot of places. Granted, there's a couple places where there's other people experiencing things, but that doesn't mean that she's not sensitive in one way or another, especially given that the experience with the woman on the road. So, but yeah, that was a lot of things. That's kind of, I don't know. I wonder how frequent the activity is for her, though, because if these things happened, like, even once or twice a week and then stopped for a while, because I've had a number of experiences over the years, but it's not every day or even every week, but I've had enough now to the point where, as I've said before, I can't even, if I tried to make a single podcast episode with all my experiences in one episode, it would take me a good probably 4 hours, maybe or more, to go over every single one. That's just how it is. I think as you get older, they stack up. So I wonder how frequent these things were for this writer, and that could be interesting to know. I mean, obviously you can't, but still very interesting. I do know what it's like when you just have experiences fairly often. It's like after a while, it's like, well, okay, that was interesting. You know, what are you gonna do? So, a good collection of stories there just from that one person, I'd say. So. Let me see. Eyes Open says, I feel like when we don't acknowledge our relationship with our extrasensory abilities, they will come and go depending on current spikes of energy around us. And yeah, that's definitely possible. I do feel energy move through my apartment here from time to time. And a lot of times it'll even happen where Logan, my cat, will kind of hang out by me if when it happens. Like, she'll be right next to me. So it's like she knows something's going on. So, yeah. At least does make sense. Yeah, it's so yeah, that's thought that was interesting. That's a lot of experiences there. So let's see here. I think we'll do. Oh yeah, this is a long one. So I think we'll do one more, and then that'll be it for the night. But like I said, it's a long one. So, and this one is about one of those places on that list of locations that seems to always have activity, and you'll figure out what I mean when I get there. This one says, sorry if it's long, but I just wanted to give context and backstory. This starts with my mom, but I experienced it too. My mom was vice president of our local hospital. I think that's what it is, VP. And when the hospital was purchased and made public, they got a brand new hospital built for them. The main priority on move day was obviously getting all the clients to the new hospital safely, along with the equipment and medicine. The old hospital was locked after that, but was still being used as storage, so staff could go back and get less important items over time. Only 3 people had access to the old hospital, key and security code for the alarm, and my mom was one of them. If someone had to return to the old hospital for something, they had to be attended by one of the 3 key holders. So my mom told me in the beginning it didn't feel too weird. It just felt like being in an empty building. But the longer it was abandoned, the more weird stuff started happening. When she had to visit the site with the other VP over construction, a big storm had hit and damaged the roof over intensive care unit, so they had to investigate the damage. My mom went to her old office first because she thought, well, since I'm here, I may as well grab a few items that are still left behind. She heard music playing down the hall when she left, and just assumed it was her colleague was on the same floor, and wanted noise to be less freaked out. He hated going in there. She went to the 5th floor, the site of the damage, and her colleague was there. So she asked if he had just come from the ground floor as well, and he said no. Why? I came directly to the 5th floor. Like I said, this building was heavily alarmed, and only 2 other colleagues had access, with my mom already there. And the alarm resets once you've entered the building. So if one of the others had come, it would have triggered the alarm again before disarming it. So there was definitely no one in the building with them. I asked my mom if I could go with her the next time she had to visit, which was soon, so she could let the construction team in, and there are a few things I experienced directly. Only the generator to the building was on. Full electricity was cut off, but room lights would turn on by themselves as you walked by. Phones that were disconnected would ring as you walked by offices. The nurse's station, the help pad that patients would buzz from their room, ring as well, and the ringing would follow us as in stop ringing on one side of the wing and start ringing on the other side once you got closer to a different nursing station. Patient call lights would turn on as you walked by rooms. These were the lights the patients operated from their beds. No beds and no other light switch were there to operate them. The pharmacy alarm was just constantly going off, and there was no way to stop it. The construction guys were of course freaked out and wanted to make sure electricity was actually cut off before they started working because of all the lights and alarms, and my mom thought, yeah, I can show you. They said that was going to be the quickest job they ever completed. And the reason for fixing an abandoned building is, like I said, still using it for storage, and they didn't want rodents getting in through the hole in the ceiling. Other stuff happened, but this is long, and I think you all get the gist. So, that's, thought that was a good one. I mean, hospitals, that's on that list of places that seems to always have activity, and I think especially once you get to the point where a building like that is mostly empty, that's one of those things I've noticed with a lot of these buildings, bigger buildings, and all the different shows I've listened to over the years and things I've read. Once a building, or if a building is abandoned most of the time and you only have a few people working there at any given time, it seems like there's activity around them. Things will happen and they won't be able to explain it because there's only a few people there, or sometimes it's only 1 or 2 people there, and you'll find out the other person that was there with you was not anywhere near the area where you were hearing or seeing things. So that's a really interesting thing. I really wonder how all that works. The devices going off like that, I don't know. I feel like someone that maybe could be people, because there are people that can affect electronics, but it seems like a lot of people there were experiencing the same thing, so maybe it's not them. Maybe it is someone or something else. Hard to say, but yeah, I thought that was a good story. So, but that's it for today. We're right at that mark where I usually like to stop, so I think that'll be it. I'll be back tomorrow night, like I said, and with more stories. So, thank you all for being here, whether it's listening live and being in the chat or listening to the podcast. Either way, I always appreciate it. We're getting more and more downloads all the time, which is just amazing to me. So, really appreciate it. But, yeah, thank you all for being here, and have a good night.